Alright everybody, welcome to week 9 of solar and wind. And Brad's out of town, so I'm going to be covering class for him today. And what I want to do is take a look at the projects that are due in class. And went a little bit too far here. Let me get back to week 9. There are some sample reports in here of other people's projects where they've done this whole proposal to submit their proposals. There's our upload in week 9. What I want to do is go over one of these examples. I just took the first one in there and downloaded it, take a look at it. Pretty in-depth, but one of the big things I want you to notice is, well, actually there's two big things here to notice. One is, even in 2010, the technology they had available to develop their paper and draft their paper, what they could do for resources and information compared to what we have in 2016. And then the other thing is prices. You'll notice a huge difference in the prices where they quoted out their system and the size of their system compared to what you guys are probably looking at for your system. Maybe an equivalent price, but their system is half the size, maybe, if that. So it really shows you how much difference there is in pricing and how much the prices come down. So it looks like they're going to, they're looking at a house here in Missoula and a cost estimate project. This is pretty traditional, so it's kind of important for us to be on board with this. Is anytime you're looking at doing this for someone, as a business, you're going to have to put together a package like this before you ever, actually start on the project. This is all your research to figure out how big the system is going to be, how much it's going to cost, and whether or not it will work. So you can see they went through a site assessment, did a load analysis, taking a look at the house, kind of like you're looking at your electric bill. Quantifying the solar resource, that's doing our research and making sure that we have enough sunlight and the system will perform. Sizing, determining how big this system has to be to meet the expectations. Specifying the equipment and the cost, and of course references. So we'll take a look at this a little bit as we go. Looking at a PV design in Missoula. They want 100% of the electricity needed to power the residents based on an evaluation of daily loads and changes in usage due to seasonal weather. So it's going to be a combination of both changes in demand and also changes in the output of what the solar array is. And because they're working on a budget, there you go. After completing the array calculations, it became apparent the size of the daily load would require a PV system beyond a realistic budget. Which is exactly what Gary has run into in looking at his system. Of the system would have to be so large to provide 100% that it just was not realistic. So it looks like they settled on design recommendation is 8 evergreen 180 watt PV modules for about 1.44 kilowatts. Nowadays you can still get 180 watt panels, but most of the panels you see out there are in the 275 to 320 watt range. But at the time 180 watts was pretty good size, even just 6 years ago. And you'll see later on when we get to the cost analysis what the difference is. So first thing we do is a site assessment, taking a look at it and saying, okay, what's available. So you can see she broke it down into 3 areas that might be usable. One was a low pitch roof off the back house, a site in the front yard that would be a pole mount array, and then a location on the high pitched roof of the garage. So those 3 were considered. S1 being the most appropriate, which probably actually for ease of use being a low pitch roof would be pretty easy to work on and on a garage, hopefully 1 story. Steep pitches kind of suck to get up on. and then a pole mount in town doesn't necessarily go over all that well, so you can see why she kind of went in that direction. Let's see. Site 1 has mostly unobstructed shade-free solar window from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. during the prime time. Shading apparent in the time between 2 and 3 p.m. Let's see, the other reasons were ease of installation, simplicity of design and cost criteria, the lower pitch obviously making it easier, and the array is closer to point of use, so it cuts down on the wiring. Let's see, and right next to the meter, that's handy. S2, you'd have to add a pole for additional cost. And they might have to do some trimming of foliage to open up the window for time. Let's see. And there's kind of a big one with funds being diverted from the budget to cover the cost of installing a pole mount. Fewer dollars could be spent on PV modules. S3 had the widest solar window, but obstructed by a utility line that parallels the alley. Shadow from the utility line caused shading issues throughout the day. And a little bit of shading does go a long ways on an array. So you can see then they use Solar Pathfinder to track these out. Site 1 looks pretty good and you can see there the drawings. I don't know if you can see the pointer there, but pretty much from 9 a.m. All the way up through between 2 and 3 p.m. they had pretty good sunlight. Yeah. There's Site 2, the pole array, and you can see there where trees would seriously cause an issue with most of your light. Looks like other than about 4 months out of the year that would be shaded. The only unobstructed time they have is over here between 2:30 in the afternoon and 4:30 in the afternoon, so basically only 2 hours unshaded. So you see where that probably wouldn't go so well. And then the third one, the high-pitched roof on the garage, would be pretty bad as well. You can see there's almost no window there in June. Literally it's only getting half an hour of sunlight. So I'm assuming that this line going through the middle right here is their shading caused by the utility lines passing overhead. Alright, load analysis. Now this is something basically the same thing you guys are doing with your utility bill. Only rather than taking a utility bill, that looks like she actually took a look at every appliance and fixture in the house and what they're using for electricity, broken down by room. It's pretty sweet. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably better off. I think we're more realistic, and it's one of the reasons you'll have opportunities to do this load analysis, but I think realistically your power bill is the best way to do it, because it's very hard to estimate how much am I going to use my microwave, how much am I going to use my television. You don't necessarily know what those are going to be.
They even have phase on there?
What's that?
What's the PHLD on the neutral?
Yes or no.
Oh.
It's yes or no, so I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know, but I'm going to take off.
Alright. So pretty detailed, but I think realistically you're much better off using your NRGY bill, because that gives you a good historic record. As long as nothing drastically changes, that should give you pretty good monthly values. Alright, so we took a look at the insulation and figured out if we did a fixed tilt system. Here's the expected output of this is the total solar insolation of the system for each month, which is nice. PV Watts website will give you that same thing. Peak hour sun. It's like we figured out that it would be in June would be 3.97 peak sun hours, and in December it would be 1.42 peak sun hours a day. So to figure it out for the system, there's where they use their electric bill, and the average daily use for electricity was 4.5 kilowatts. I'm assuming that's 4.5 kilowatt hours that they used. So at the same time they were doing this good, they were looking at suggestions of how to decrease electric consumption. Here, changing bulbs, unplugging the phantom loads, using other methods that are an electric clothes dryer, energy efficient appliances, additional insulation, so all kinds of things to reduce their demand. But their calculations determined what they were going to get. Low estimate based on peak sun was 4.5 kilowatts, and high estimate was 6 kilowatts. So basing the array on that, which is nice, they went into quite the details here. PV temperature loss, figuring out average temperatures, the D-rate factor, and inverter efficiency to figure out the most value. So their low estimate was 7 modules, their high estimate was 9 modules that they would need. Remember, they were talking about 180 watt PV modules for that. As far as the inverter, Xantrex, still a brand name that's around. 94% efficiency is pretty close, I would guess. It was rated to 2800 watts. They're only looking at 1440 watts for their system, so that fits within that capacity. Now I'd be curious to see on this paragraph, they talk about tilt here and adjusting the tilt seasonably to maximize the insulation. And what we've seen is nowadays if you use PV Watts and you can play around with that tilt angle and it'll do the calculations for you, is that tilt typically, depending on what the extra cost of those legs are, plus the issue of having to get up on your roof, once a month or every 2 months to change it, typically the output between the two tilt angles is not enough to justify the cost of them. I know at least during our practicum that was the case. There was a difference of about $32 over the 30-year lifespan of the system, depending on whether we tilted and adjusted the panels annually or left them flat. So definitely something to look into when you do this. And here is the wake-up call. In 2010 prices, 180 watt panel, like I said, that's fairly small compared to what we see out there now. $1,205 per panel, which I want to do a little calculation on that right now because to figure out what that is per watt. By So it's $6.71 per watt for those solar panels. Nowadays, if you do a little bit of shopping around, I think you're finding that you can get them for less than $1 a watt. So this system is basically 7 times more expensive just for the panels than what we're looking at today in 6 years' time. To give you an idea how much the technology has improved and how much prices have dropped on solar. So 8 solar panels, that is the vast majority of the cost of their system, $9,640. The inverter, $23.75. Again, that's a pretty high price, and most grid tie inverters nowadays are running right at $800 probably for something to run this system. $800 to $1,500, somewhere in that range. Let's see. That must be ground fault protection. I think that's their disconnect, $275. Unirack's pretty standard mounting system. Although in your project I just gave you a fixed rate of it's going to cost you $1,000 for racking and wiring, so don't worry about it. But they actually went through that. Combiner box $150. DC disconnect $329. Load center single phase was $177. Bus bars $23. Wires $45. Total cost on the system is $13,254. So pretty spendy. Almost $10 a watt for a 1.4 kilowatt system. And nowadays you can do that for probably half that at least. There you go, adding in labor for 24 hours to install it, $1,200 for an install. Equipment, labor, and miscellaneous, $16,454 for that system installed. Pretty spendy. So if you take a look at what they had available, used AAE Solar's Renewable Energy Design Guide and Catalog, Photovoltaics Design and Installation Manual, and the Solar Pathfinder. So pretty much all paperbacks, and they didn't have the fancy sites like the PV watts that'll tell you all the calculations to do all the work for you. So a little more legwork involved on their part. So here we go, site 1. Looks like, well, you can definitely see the shading here. I'm going to assume it's probably this flat roof right here on the second story below these windows. They're by the satellite dish. But the shading would definitely cause some issues there, depending on what time of day that picture is taken. Garage roof. That was the steep roof. Hopefully they'll come back to that. And then here's our pole mount over here for site 2. Okay, so there is the garage roof for site 3, and then these are the power lines up here, utility lines that would be causing the shading and causing problems for them. And you can see where they'd have a lot of problems with shading if they weren't taking care of the trees and being careful with that. So that kind of gives you an idea. This is a little more in-depth than what I ask you guys to do for your project. But this would be a pretty comprehensive package that would be expected if you were doing this, as a business, and somebody a customer wanted you to design a system for them. This is kind of what the package would look like. This is what the customer is expecting, and this is kind of the legwork that you're going to have to do. We're pretty casual about just plugging systems together here in class, but out in the real world, pretty much any business you talk to, before the first dollar is spent, they're providing a package like this to the customers. It tells exactly what you're doing, how you're going to do it, how much it's going to cost, what the expected output is, and all those things obviously go towards making the sale if that's what you're going to do, and making them decide whether or not they want to install that system. So that's what we're looking at for you guys. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to talk to Brad or I, whether here on the forum, email us. Email is probably the best way. Brad will be back in town next week and heading up class. I've seen a few projects now. You guys are plugging right along on them. That looks great. And feel free to bounce ideas off of us. I know at least several students have sent us their drafts saying, hey, what do you think about this? And we'll give them pointers and advice of how to spruce it up before they turn it in, obviously. So feel free to do that. Utilize us. That's what we're there for. And we will see you next week.